Vielen Dank, Mrs. In 't Veld.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd first like to come back to a couple of remarks made by Mr. Kirkhope, who, in one respect, I agree with him. We seem to have a completely different idea of what democracy means. I think democracy is about checks and balances. It is about citizens being able to know what their governments are doing. I do not think that democracy is about governments having unlimited, uncontrolled and uncontrollable powers. That is not democracy. Interestingly, I just read on a news site that apparently today Prime Minister Juncker of Luxembourg may resign over a scandal whereby secret services have been involved in illegal wiretapping. So they take it seriously. I think we should take it seriously as well, and I would like to echo the words of Renate Weber. We owe it to our citizens. Citizens are talking about this. The Parliament cannot ignore this, so we should not even put any question marks over whether or not to conduct an inquiry. I agree with Carlos Coelho that we should build on what has been done already by the Echelon Committee. I think we should be very, or distinguish very clearly between four problems. One is the massive spying on citizens, warrantless spying for purposes which are totally unclear. I mean, it goes way beyond terrorism. That's one. Second is the classic spying, if you want, of the US on EU countries. But that is, let's say, 007 type spying. The third is bugging of EU offices, which in my view, cannot be related to the fight against terrorism. I really fail to see how that can be relating to terrorism. And okay, maybe I'm naive, I don't know. And then the fourth one, and that's a very important one as well, is massive spying by member state governments on EU citizens. Similar programs and possibly agreements with the Americans to exchange this kind of data. And although I don't want to hurt any feelings here, but I would really like to know what the impact will be of yesterday's announcement by the UK government that they will pull out of police and justice cooperation next year. I think that should be included in the considerations. Like Mrs. Sippel, I think we should look very closely at the impact of all this on the PNR and SWIFT agreements and the safe harbour. Mrs. Malmström has made a statement about that, pulling it into question. I think that was the right statement to make. I think one point we should focus on is democratic oversight over intelligence services. I think we have to recognise there is a de facto EU intelligence service. It exists. It's called INCEN. It used to be CITCEN, now it's INCEN. There are EU officials working there. But officially it doesn't exist. You know, it's only a kind of dotted line that connects it to the External Action Service. I think we have to be very clear about what its mandate is, who's working there, do they have operational tasks, and what arrangements do we have for democratic oversight. I think there are none, actually. And that's unacceptable. Every member state, or every country indeed, has a form of democratic oversight over the activities of intelligence services. If we are going to have an EU intelligence service, which may be a good idea, then there should be democratic oversight. And I was kindly reminded by somebody here in the room that somebody said, well, you know, we're not going to get anything out of secret services. In the CIA committee, the inquiry committee, we had the head of the Italian secret service who brought testimony to this house and who then eventually had to step down. I think he's in jail now, if I'm not mistaken, or his deputy is in jail. I think one very important point is that we need urgently to solve the problem that we have flagged up so many times over the years, and that is the jurisdictional conflict between the EU and the US. The US seems to consider that its jurisdiction extends over the entire globe. I feel rather differently. I think that the laws that we make here in Europe apply to EU citizens on this territory. It is unacceptable that laws of another country take precedence over our own laws on this territory. That needs to be clarified urgently. Then a few practical issues on the timetable. I wonder why we have to report in December. Why can't we report in January or February? It will be very tight and very close to the end of the mandate, but given that we have so little time, why don't we grant ourselves these additional 2 months? Then I agree with the suggestions that have been made for speakers. I think we should also try as much as possible to cooperate and even have joint sessions with national parliaments, because they will be conducting inquiries as well. And finally, Chair, I really don't see the added value of a visit to Washington. I'd really like to know, why do I have to go to Washington? What for? I mean, what are we going to hear there that we don't hear here? It's not as if we have too much time on our hands. I've made plenty of trips to Washington, with exactly zero result. So I'd like to delete that from the programme. Thank you.